At my grandfather's funeral, the air in the Grand Cathedral in Honolulu was thick with tension, the kind that presses down on your shoulders. Hundreds of people partners, longtime employees, even local leaders filled the pews under the stained glass windows, letting in that soft Hawaiian sunlight. But my stepmother wasn't there to grieve. She was there to stake her claim. Before the pastor could even finish the final blessing, Victoria strode up to the podium, grabbed the microphone with a confident smile, and announced to the entire room that my half-sister Brooke would officially inherit the entire $500 million resort empire, every luxury property across the islands. She paused, scanning the crowd for approval, expecting applause that never came. And that's when it happened. A low, dry chuckle cut through the silence, echoing clearly from the direction of my grandfather's coffin through the cathedral's sound system, the very system he'd insisted stay exactly as is, per his will. It wasn't a ghost. It was a recording. The look of shock on Victoria's face was instant, and the flicker of panic in Brooke's eyes was unmistakable. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from right now, what time it is for you, and if you've ever witnessed family inheritance drama like this in real life. I'd love to hear your stories. To understand why my grandfather was laughing from the grave, we have to go back just a few days, because my half-sister isn't the person they thought she was. A few days before the funeral, I was at the headquarters on Waikiki Beach, standing near the large reception desk where staff members kept glancing at their screens with worried expressions. The sudden loss of my grandfather had sent ripples through the entire company. Emails poured in from partners across the islands asking for reassurance reservations. We're seeing early cancellations, and the atmosphere felt fragile, like one wrong word could tip everything into chaos. Harry, my grandfather's trusted chief of staff who had been with him for nearly 40 years, was right there with me, answering calls with his usual steady voice, reminding everyone that operations would continue as normal until further notice. We had just finished reassuring a group of department heads when the elevator doors opened with a soft ding. My dad Gregory stepped out first. He wore a tailored dark navy suit, white shirt, crisp expression appropriately somber. Victoria was right behind him in an elegant black sheath dress, pearls subdued hair pulled back neatly. Brooke followed in a simple black blouse and skirt, carrying a small leather folder, her face composed in what looked like quiet grief. Gregory spotted me across the lobby and walked straight over. He placed both hands on my shoulders for a moment before pulling me into a brief, firm hug. "Summer," he said, his tone low and measured. "I know this hits all of us hard. Dad built something incredible here, and he'd want us to protect it together as a family." The words landed perfectly, calming a few nearby employees who had paused to watch. Victoria approached next, offering a gentle smile to the front desk staff before turning to me. She asked if there was anything she could do to help with arrangements, then turned to the small cluster of managers and inquired softly whether the team needed support, perhaps coffee brought up, or a quiet space to process. A couple of them murmured thanks, visibly eased by the gesture. Brooke hung back at first, then stepped forward and gave me a quick embrace. She didn't say much, just nodded solemnly when someone mentioned how sudden it all was. Gregory suggested we move to the main conference room for a short discussion, nothing formal, just family, and a handful of key staff to align on next steps. "We have to project stability," he explained calmly. "Partners are watching, investors too. One sign of fracture and rumors spread fast." Everyone agreed it made sense. We walked down the hallway lined with framed photos of properties: Maui oceanfront villas, Big Island golf resorts, Oahu beachfront hotels, and settled around the long koa wood table that my grandfather had custom-made decades ago. Gregory took a seat near the head, but not quite in my grandfather's usual spot, as if respecting the empty chair. He started by acknowledging the shock everyone felt, then emphasized continuity. "Dad's vision was always about family stewardship," he said. "We honor that by showing the world we're united." Victoria added that inviting select long-term investors to the memorial service could demonstrate strength and commitment to the future. It sends the right message, she noted thoughtfully, that the Hayes legacy is secure. Brooke spoke up quietly, suggesting we prepare a few understated family photos next to grandfather's portrait strictly for internal newsletters and staff updates. Something simple, she said, to remind everyone we're still here, still together. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, fitting the moment perfectly. I sat opposite them, listening carefully. The conversation stayed productive ideas for a press statement coordinating with the board, ensuring payroll and bookings ran smoothly. Gregory praised Harry's long service openly, thanking him for holding things together in the immediate aftermath. Victoria asked Harry directly about logistics for out-of-state partners flying in. Brooke jotted notes on her phone, looking engaged. The meeting lasted about 40 minutes. When it wrapped, people left with clearer direction and a bit less anxiety. Gregory shook hands with the remaining managers, and reiterated that family came first right now. As the room cleared, he turned to Harry with a warm pat on the back. "You've been the backbone of this place forever," he said sincerely. "Truly irreplaceable work. But after all these years, maybe it's time to start thinking about some well-deserved downtime." Harry met the comment with a polite smile and nod, nothing more. Once we were alone for a moment, I caught his eye across the table. That single glance said everything. We both understood the subtext. Whatever my grandfather had quietly set in motion years earlier was still intact, waiting patiently for exactly this kind of moment. That shared glance with Harry pulled my mind back to the long years I'd spent proving myself in this family business. The memories surfaced one by one, but three stood out above the rest: the times when everything hung in the balance, and I was the one who stepped up. The first real test came with the devastating hurricane that hit Maui head-on. Sustained winds topped 120 miles per hour, storm surge flooded coastal roads, and debris turned entire neighborhoods into obstacle courses. Our flagship resort took the worst of it. Roofs ripped off cabanas, salt water inundating the lower levels, electrical systems fried. Insurance adjusters were already talking about total loss, and local authorities hinted at possible condemnation if we couldn't prove structural integrity fast. While other executives monitored from the mainland, I caught the first available flight in and stayed on site for weeks. I coordinated cleanup crews at dawn, met with county officials in makeshift tents, and sat down with native Hawaiian families whose ancestral lands bordered ours. They had legitimate concerns about runoff and erosion threatening sacred sites. I listened without interrupting, brought in independent engineers they trusted, and committed to new buffer zones and restoration funding on the spot. We rebuilt stronger with elevated structures and native landscaping that actually improved the ecosystem. The resort reopened ahead of projections and earned local goodwill that paid off for years. When I reported the final numbers, my grandfather simply reviewed the documents in his office, nodded once, and told Harry to handle my bonus separately. No announcement, no family dinner mention. The second major challenge unfolded slowly on Kauai, where an old land claim resurfaced and threatened one of our most exclusive properties. Descendants of a 19th-century Kuleana parcel produced documents showing boundary overlap with our golf course and spa facilities. The dispute had been dormant for decades, but new surveys triggered lawsuits that could freeze development indefinitely. Attorneys recommended aggressive litigation, projecting 3 to 5 years in court and 8-figure legal fees. I took a different approach. I spent months attending community meetings, learning about cultural significance, hiring neutral historians, both sides accepted. Negotiations stretched late into evenings in local halls filled with skeptical residents. Compromises came hard: access easements, revenue percentages, cultural interpretation centers, but we reached agreement without headlines or forced sales. The property's value soared once uncertainty lifted, positioning us for expansions we'd only dreamed about. Grandfather went through the settlement papers methodically, then quietly directed Harry to allocate additional equity in my name, filed under a private designation. The third crisis arrived without warning when the pandemic shut down travel worldwide. Overnight occupancy dropped to single digits, cash reserves burned fast, and lenders grew nervous. Refinancing discussions turned tense as banks demanded collateral concessions or outright asset liquidation. I assembled a small crisis team and ran projections around the clock, identifying every possible cut without destroying the workforce we'd built over generations. We shifted marketing to drive markets, launched staycation packages for Hawaii residents, partnered with local businesses for joint promotions. I personally negotiated payment deferrals, tapped every available federal program, and restructured debt terms that bought us breathing room. When borders reopened and bookings surged back, the company emerged leaner but whole. No resorts sold, no core staff lost. Grandfather studied the recovery reports in silence for a long time. As always, he instructed Harry to document my performance shares, discreetly separate from standard distributions. Looking back, those isolated instructions had seemed like simple prudence from a man who'd seen too many family empires fracture. Now the pattern felt deliberate, each achievement banked away from prying eyes, building something only he and Harry fully understood. Across the same years, Brooke enjoyed a very different experience. Gregory and Victoria made sure she accompanied them to exclusive investor retreats, charity galas, even informal golf outings with major partners. They positioned her as the bright young face of continuity, the natural successor who understood modern luxury trends. She smiled for photographs beside new property renderings, repeated talking points about sustainability and guest experience, and collected compliments on her poise. Yet she never joined the late-night strategy sessions, never reviewed vendor contracts or occupancy forecasts. I watched it all without comment, continued showing up early and staying late, handling whatever needed fixing next. Through everything, I held onto the conviction that my grandfather saw the real contributions. I trusted he possessed his own sense of fairness, one that didn't require public validation. The weight of those recollections settled as the present demanded attention again. The present snapped back into focus when my phone buzzed with a message from Gregory, asking me to come to Grandfather's private office right away and to bring Harry. Funeral arrangements were barely underway, but he wanted a quick word, just the four of us. I exchanged a quick look with Harry and we walked the short hallway from the executive floor to the corner suite overlooking the Pacific. The door was already ajar. Gregory was inside, standing behind the wide koa desk, fingers tracing the carved edge as if measuring it for replacement. Victoria sat in one of the leather guest chairs, a slim leather portfolio open on her lap. Brooke leaned against the window frame, scrolling her phone but glancing up when we entered. Gregory motioned for us to sit. No small talk, no condolences this time. He got straight to business. "We can't afford to wait," he said, voice clipped. "The market is already nervous. Delays will cost us value every day. We need to move fast, secure control, and show strength." Victoria flipped open her portfolio and slid a printed list across the desk, names of estate attorneys, tax specialists, and trust advisors, some with notes about prior consultations. "I've been in touch," she said calmly. "They're ready to file whatever we need for asset transfers and inheritance tax optimization. We can restructure ownership quietly, minimize exposure." Brooke put her phone away and leaned forward. "I spoke to our contact at the bank yesterday," she added. "They're prepared to extend additional lines of credit against the properties if we need liquidity immediately. I can sign whatever's required." Gregory nodded approval at both of them, then turned to me. His expression hardened. "Look, Summer, I was young once. I made mistakes. Took a little from company funds back in the day to cover some personal investments. Dad knew. He covered it, never brought it up again. But that debt's been hanging over me my whole life. Now it's time to balance the books, put things where they belong with the family that's actually moving forward." He spread a map of the holdings across the desk, pointing to prime undeveloped acreage on the Big Island oceanfront parcels, with approved permits for luxury villas. This section alone could bring in enough to diversify properly, he continued. Sell it off, free up capital for real assets, a proper yacht for client entertainment, maybe a place in Europe for off-season retreats. Something that reflects where we're headed. Victoria chimed in with figures she'd already run: projected sale prices, tax implications under current trust structures, potential buyers she'd quietly sounded out. Brooke pulled up comparable sales on her tablet, highlighting how similar land had moved quickly at premium rates. The conversation flowed, fast ideas bouncing without pause. They discussed rebranding certain properties, shifting management contracts, even floating the idea of bringing in outside investors for a minority stake to modernize operations. Harry sat quietly through most of it, hands folded. When Gregory finally addressed him directly, the tone shifted. Harry, you've been loyal forever, but we need fresh perspectives now. Your role here, it's served its purpose. We'll make sure you're comfortable, but it's time. Harry stood without argument. Gregory waved him out with a dismissive gesture. The door clicked shut behind him. A stack of projections slid off the desk during the animated discussion and scattered across the floor. I bent down, gathered the pages one by one, straightened them into a neat pile. No one paused to help. When they finished mapping out timelines, closing dates, signing authorities, press release drafts, they gathered their things. Gregory clapped his hands once satisfied. This is how we protect what Dad built, he said as they headed for the door, already laughing about yacht models and locations in the south of France. The room fell silent once they left. Moments later, the door opened again. Harry stepped back in, reached into his jacket pocket, and placed a small remote on the desk in front of me. He saw this coming a long time ago, he said quietly. Everything's ready. The day of the funeral arrived soon enough. The soft chuckle from the speakers died away, leaving the cathedral in a hush so complete it felt like the air itself had thickened. Then the massive screen behind the altar came alive with a soft glow. My grandfather Richard appeared on it, seated at his old COA desk in the Waikiki office, wearing the familiar navy vest and striped tie he reserved for important meetings. His face filled the frame, calm and deliberate the way it always was when he reviewed numbers. He didn't waste time with greetings or condolences. His voice came through the system clear and steady, the same tone he'd used in boardrooms for decades. Let's start with the private jet usage, he said. Dates and routes began scrolling beside his image: flights booked for weekend getaways to the Maldives, holiday trips to Aspen, spontaneous evenings in Las Vegas. Each entry showed the exact invoice amount charged to company accounts, with Brooke's signature visible at the bottom of every approval form. The screen transitioned smoothly. Next came the jewelry acquisitions. High-resolution scans of receipts filled the display: diamond stud earrings from a Rodeo Drive jeweler, a custom sapphire pendant from a Fifth Avenue designer, several luxury watches transferred directly from corporate expense lines. Victoria's name appeared on multiple transfers routed through various subsidiary accounts. He moved on without pause. The boutique project, he continued. Lease contracts for a high-traffic space in Waikiki appeared, followed by inventory purchase orders totaling hundreds of thousands, marketing campaign budgets, and grand opening photos. Then the closure notice 6 months later, with final liquidation losses highlighted in stark red figures. The display shifted again to luxury shopping records, clothing and accessories from flagship stores in Honolulu and Los Angeles, designer handbags, shoes, custom evening wear, charged over several years. The cumulative total climbed steadily as each transaction was itemized, every signature and approval clearly traceable. Throughout the presentation, Grandfather narrated in the same even voice. He explained that he had intentionally routed the larger requests through Brooke, insisting she sign each draw personally. I told her it was preparation, he said, training to understand the responsibility that comes with being an heir, to learn the weight of decisions involving company funds. One slide after another built the picture. Loans against future revenue streams, advances on projected distributions, credit lines extended under her name. He detailed how certain expenses had been reclassified over time to avoid immediate scrutiny, how signatures had been collected gradually until the total became impossible to ignore. The congregation sat motionless. Partners in the middle rows shifted in their seats. Longtime employees stared at the floor or at the screen in disbelief. No one spoke. No one coughed. In the front row, Victoria's breathing had become audible, short, ragged inhales that cut through the silence like small gasps. Brooke gripped the wooden pew edge so tightly her knuckles turned white. Grandfather paused briefly between sections, letting the numbers settle over the room. He showed how the boutique's marketing budget alone had exceeded projections by nearly 40%, how private jet bookings had spiked during periods when resort occupancy was low, how jewelry purchases often coincided with major investor meetings but were never tied to business purposes. The final slide froze on a running total that dwarfed any reasonable allowance or bonus structure. He looked straight into the camera, eyes sharp and unblinking. "That is the record as it stands," he said quietly. "Now we move to the next part." The recording continued without interruption. Grandfather's image held steady on the screen as the recording rolled forward without the slightest pause. He adjusted his tie, once a habit I'd seen countless times in person, then spoke again in that deliberate, unflinching tone. "I didn't build this empire on assumptions," he said. When Gregory remarried and brought Victoria and Brooke into the family, questions arose not about affection, but about the line of succession. I acted quietly. A private DNA test was conducted years ago through a certified lab here in Honolulu. The sample collection followed strict chain of custody protocols. The results were sealed until now. The display changed. His face moved to one side, while the full laboratory report filled the other. Official letterhead accreditation seals date several years back. Genetic markers listed in clinical detail. Paternal alleles compared side by side, grandfather's known profile, Gregory's confirmed sample, and Brooke's. The conclusion block stood out in bold lettering: no match on the Hayes paternal lineage. Probability of relation less than 1%. Gasps rippled through the pews. A few people in the back leaned forward, straining to read the fine print projected large for everyone to see. Grandfather continued without reaction to the noise. "This isn't about judgment," he stated. "It's about clarity. Legacy in a family business like ours carries legal weight under Hawaii probate and trust statutes. Bloodline provisions exist for a reason, to protect against dilution or outside claims that could fracture control." The screen transitioned again. Scanned images of legal documents replaced the lab report. Multi-page promissory notes, loan agreements, equity pledge forms, all bearing Brooke's signature in blue ink, Victoria's on several co-signatures. Highlighted sections zoomed in automatically, the critical clauses drafted under standard revocable living trust rules, common in family-held corporations. He read the key language aloud, word for word. In the event cumulative obligations exceed the designated threshold, the borrower agrees to immediate forfeiture of all inheritance entitlements, voting rights, and beneficial interest in trust assets. Said interests shall transfer automatically to any party satisfying the outstanding balance on behalf of the trust, thereby preserving operational continuity and preventing forced sale or dissolution. Slide after slide illustrated the buildup. Threshold limits defined in dollars tied to appraised company value. Running totals updated quarterly. Breach date flagged in red when the line was crossed. No grace period. No appeal, self-executing under the trust's protective mechanisms, fully compliant with state law governing creditor rights in probate avoidance instruments. Grandfather explained each step methodically. How the documents had been executed in his office, witnessed by Harry and a notary. how repayments were tracked in separate ledgers, how no one challenged the terms at signing because they appeared routine standard boilerplate for advances against future distributions. Now, he said, voice steady, someone chose to act when the breach triggered. That person deployed every available resource: annual performance bonuses, vested equity releases, personal savings accumulated over years to retire the debt in full, bank confirmations, wire records, satisfaction of note filings, all processed through corporate counsel. The final batch of slides appeared: payment histories, cleared balance statements, formal assignment of forfeited interests, recipient line on each transfer, Summer Hayes. Effective immediately upon settlement, full ownership, control, and management authority vested in her name, irrevocable under the trust's anti-contest provisions. The cathedral remained frozen. No one moved. Even the faint hum of air conditioning seemed louder in the vacuum. Gregory stared at the screen as if it were written in another language. Victoria's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came. Brooke's hands trembled on the pew in front of her. Grandfather wrapped up the legal explanation with the same precision he'd applied to every acquisition or expansion I'd ever watched him close. By operation of the agreements and Hawaii statutes governing trusts and estates, he concluded, every asset, every share, every decision now rests legally with Summer. No probate challenge can override self-executing clauses of this nature. It's done. Then for the first time his expression changed. The hard lines around his eyes softened. He leaned closer to the lens as though the camera were the only person in the room. Summer. He said, the warmth in his voice, something I'd rarely heard directed at anyone. You didn't inherit this empire. You bought it back with your own sweat, your own choices, your own sacrifices. Hold on to it. Protect it the way you always have. The screen faded to black. The projector fan spun down. Lights in the cathedral brightened gradually, revealing rows of stunned faces. The silence shattered in the front row. The cathedral lights brightened fully, washing the stained glass colors across the pews and exposing every expression in sharp detail. Victoria twisted in her seat first, face flushed, deep crimson eyes locked on Brooke with pure venom. I put everything on the wrong horse, she spat, voice slicing through the stunned quiet. Her words carried to the rows behind, drawing sharp intakes of breath from longtime staff who'd never heard her raise her tone before. Brooke jerked back, as if struck, shock flashing across her features before twisting into raw anger. She rose halfway from the bench, finger jabbing toward her mother. You swore it was locked in. You kept saying the old man would never dig that deep. Then she rounded on Gregory, volume climbing. And you must have known about the test all along and stayed silent. Gregory pushed up from his seat, palms open in a placating gesture, but the usual authority in his posture had evaporated. I assumed it was taken care of, he stammered, glancing between them. Dad gave me his word years ago that family would stay family. He reached for Victoria's elbow to steady her, but she yanked away violently, still fixated on Brooke. Brooke refused to let it drop. She shoved past the end of the pew and charged down the center aisle straight toward me, heels clicking hard against the stone floor. This is all rigged, she yelled, voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. You orchestrated the whole thing. You and that assistant schemed for years to take what was ours. She stopped inches away, chest heaving, waiting for denial or defense that I didn't offer. I remained seated, hands folded in my lap, meeting her glare without a word. Victoria followed seconds later, storming after her daughter with fury undimmed. She caught Brooke by the upper arm and spun her around forcefully. That's enough out of you, she snapped. I'm done being tied to some worthless girl who delivers nothing. The declaration rang out cold and absolute, cutting deeper than any shout. Gregory tried once more to mediate, stepping between mother and daughter with arms outstretched. We can fix this, he insisted weakly, but his eyes darted to the exiting guests, realizing how exposed they all were. No one moved to support him. Harry chose that moment to act. He emerged from the side aisle carrying 3 crisp envelopes, stride measured and unhurried. He stopped first in front of Gregory, extended one envelope. Revocation of all privileges, he stated plainly. Banking access, corporate cards, facility keys, vehicle assignments terminated effective immediately. He moved to Victoria next, repeating the delivery with the same calm precision. She snatched the envelope but didn't open it, fingers trembling. Harry finished with Brooke, who took hers without meeting his eyes. Security personnel in dark suits materialized quietly at the ends of the row, presence alone enough to discourage escalation. They stood ready but silent. Partners who'd lingered in the middle sections now rose decisively. Briefcases clicked shut, coats draped over arms. One by one, they headed for the exits, conversations starting in hushed tones as they passed through the heavy doors. Managers and department heads followed, some offering brief, respectful nods in my direction, others simply departing the uncomfortable scene. The front area grew increasingly isolated. Victoria turned her back completely on Brooke, arms crossed tight. Gregory collapsed back into his seat, elbows on knees, staring blankly at the altar. Brooke remained standing in the aisle, envelope clutched in one hand, realizing no ally was coming to her side. More attendees filed out. Footsteps multiplied, doors opening and closing in steady rhythm. The vast space that had been packed minutes earlier now echoed with emptiness. The 3 of them sat or stood amid the growing void, bound by nothing but shared defeat. No reconciliation attempts, no whispered strategies, just the weight of consequences settling in real time. The cathedral doors finally swung shut behind the last departing guest, leaving only faint sunlight filtering through the windows. Life outside moved on under clear Hawaiian skies. Life outside the cathedral continued under the bright Hawaiian sun, as if nothing had changed. I took over the empire methodically, one decision at a time. Board meetings shifted to practical agendas, occupancy forecasts, renovation schedules, new sustainability initiatives for the properties. Staff adjusted quickly. Many had waited years for direction focused on operations rather than personal drama. Partners reached out with congratulations and renewed commitments. The transition felt smooth because the foundation had always been there. I simply stepped fully into the light. Updates about the others arrived indirectly at first. Court filings appeared in public records. Gregory initiated divorce proceedings against Victoria, citing irreconcilable differences and explicitly structuring the settlement to shield his remaining assets from joint liability. The paperwork made clear he wanted no shared responsibility for the debts now coming due. Brooke's situation unraveled faster. Auction notices listed her jewelry collection pieces I'd seen in those scanned receipts, sold off piece by piece to cover personal loan balances. Her luxury SUV appeared on a dealer lot within weeks, repossessed after missed payments. Credit reports circulated in financial circles showed mounting collections actions. Victoria fought hardest. She retained aggressive counsel and filed challenges against the trust provisions, arguing undue influence and procedural errors. Hearings dragged through Honolulu courts, but judges upheld the documents repeatedly, self-executing clauses, proper execution, no evidence of coercion. Hawaii law favors clear intent in revocable trusts, especially protective mechanisms designed to prevent dissipation. Her claims collapsed under the weight of the signed agreements. Their social circle shrank accordingly. Invitations to charity events stopped arriving. Country club memberships lapsed unpaid. Whispers at industry gatherings shifted from sympathy to distance. They faded from the scene that had once embraced them. Attempts at contact came anyway. Emails forwarded by assistants, voicemails left on old numbers, even a handwritten letter once. I never responded. Every channel got blocked, every message deleted, unread. No explanations, no second chances. The line was drawn the moment the screen went dark in the cathedral. Morning settled into a quiet routine. I'd arrive early at the headquarters, ride the elevator to the top floor, and step onto the wide balcony overlooking Waikiki. The ocean stretched endless waves rolling in with reliable rhythm. Trade winds carried salt air through the open doors. I kept grandfather's koa desk exactly as it was, no glass top, no modern upgrades. The wood grain still showed the faint marks from decades of use. Papers stacked neatly, monitors positioned where he liked them. In the bottom drawer, the original key to the office safe remained untouched, cool metal against my fingers when I checked occasionally. A silent reminder that some things are earned, not inherited. The resort chain grew steadily under focused leadership. New environmental partnerships with local organizations strengthened community ties. Occupancy rates climbed as word spread about renewed stability. Expansion plans moved forward on parcels we'd protected for years. Looking back, the real inheritance wasn't money or property. It was the understanding that greed doesn't just consume wealth, it erodes every bond it touches. What looks like family on paper can dissolve the moment truth arrives. Real connection comes from shared effort, from showing up when it's hard, from choosing the long-term good over short-term gain. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Sweat does. That's the lesson I carry every day on that balcony, watching the sun rise over water my grandfather first fell in love with. The Hayes Resort Empire thrives, not because of a name on a birth certificate, but because someone was willing to protect it when no one else would. Greed took their assets and their illusions. It left me with something stronger: clarity.